Welcome to Cosmic Whispers, where cosmic mysteries come alive. Your journey beyond the stars begins now. Deep within the soil of ancient forests lies a hidden realm of activity invisible to the human eye. For centuries, trees have been perceived as solitary, stationary organisms competing for resources. But recent scientific discoveries have revealed a far more complex reality. Trees communicate, share resources, and even warn each other of danger through an intricate network beneath our feet. This network, composed primarily of fungal threads called mycorrhizae, connects trees in ways that challenge our understanding of forest ecosystems and plant intelligence. In the 1980s, researchers began documenting unusual patterns in forest health that couldn't be explained by conventional biological understanding. Trees appeared to be transferring nutrients to neighbors in need, and information about threats seemed to travel through the forest at speeds impossible for random chance. These observations led to a revolutionary hypothesis. Perhaps trees weren't isolated individuals, but interconnected members of a sophisticated community. Today, this underworld network is commonly referred to as the Wood Wide Web, a term first coined in the journal Nature in 1997. It describes the vast, tangled web of fungal connections that link trees together beneath the forest floor. The fungi form symbiotic relationships with tree roots in structures called mycorrhizae, literally fungus roots, creating biological pipelines that extend the tree's reach far beyond their visible root systems. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, Cosmic Whispers is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. The scale of this network is staggering. A single cubic centimeter of forest soil can contain up to 1 kilometer of fungal threads, with the largest known individual fungal organisms spanning thousands of acres. The most famous example is the honey fungus in Oregon's Blue Mountains, stretching across 2,400 hectares and estimated to be between 2,000 and 8,000 years old, making it potentially one of the oldest living organisms on Earth. This fungal network creates a communications infrastructure comparable to our internet, but instead of digital data packets, it transmits chemical signals and nutrients. The University of British Columbia researcher, Dr. Suzanne Simard, a pioneer in this field, discovered that Douglas fir and paper birch trees share carbon through mycorrhizal networks. When one species was in shade, it received more carbon from its neighbor in sunlight. This exchange wasn't random charity, but a sophisticated response to environmental conditions. What makes these findings particularly remarkable is how they challenge our human-centric view of intelligence and communication. We've long defined these qualities in terms of brains, neurons, and consciousness, attributes we considered uniquely animal, if not specifically human. But trees and fungi have evolved alternative mechanisms for processing information and responding to their environment collectively. As the sun's rays filter through the forest canopy, they illuminate only half the story. The true complexity of forest life extends into the darkness below, where roots and fungi intermingle in an embrace that's lasted for hundreds of millions of years. This relationship dates back to when plants first colonized land, suggesting that networking and cooperation may be as fundamental to evolution as competition. As we venture deeper into this underground world, we'll discover how trees use this network to defend themselves, nurture their young, and perhaps even recognize their kin, capabilities that blur the boundaries between our understanding of plants and animals, and force us to reconsider what it means to communicate, cooperate, and perhaps even remember. The foundation of forest communication networks lies in a remarkable evolutionary partnership that began over 400 million years ago. When plants first ventured onto land, they faced a hostile environment with limited access to essential nutrients. Fungi, already adapted to terrestrial life, offered a solution. By partnering with plant roots, fungi could access sugars produced through photosynthesis, while plants gained access to water and nutrients that fungi could efficiently extract from soil. This ancient symbiotic relationship, mycorrhizae, remains the cornerstone of terrestrial ecosystems today. Mycorrhizal fungi come in two primary forms: each creating distinct types of forest networks. Ectomycorrhizal fungi wrap around tree root cells without penetrating them, forming a protective sheath that extends into the soil. These relationships are common in forest trees like pines, oaks, and birches. Endomycorrhizal fungi, or arbuscular, mycorrhizal fungi, actually penetrate the cell walls of tree roots, creating intricate branching structures called arbuscules where resources are exchanged. Approximately 80% of terrestrial plants form these relationships, including most flowering plants and crops. The fungal threads, called hyphae, aggregate into complex structures known as mycelium, vast underground networks that can extend far beyond the tree's root zone. A single teaspoon of healthy forest soil may contain several miles of these fungal filaments. The mycelium effectively serves as an extension of the tree's root system, increasing its nutrient absorption surface area by up to 700 times. This expanded reach allows trees to access resources from far greater distances than their roots alone could manage. Resource exchange across the mycorrhizal network operates on principles similar to market economics. Trees deliver between 10 and 40% of the carbon they produce through photosynthesis to their fungal partners. In exchange, the fungi provide trees with essential minerals like phosphorus and nitrogen, which they extract from soil with remarkable efficiency. This exchange isn't merely passive. Research from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences has demonstrated that both partners can regulate the flow of resources based on what they receive, suggesting a sophisticated trading system. The network's physical structure resembles our internet in surprising ways. Some trees, particularly older, larger individuals, serve as hubs with extensive connections to surrounding trees. These hub trees, sometimes called mother trees, can be linked to hundreds of younger trees, creating a hierarchical architecture that facilitates efficient resource distribution throughout the forest. Studies using isotope tracing have shown that carbon can move from one tree to another through these connections in as little as a few hours. This network architecture wasn't fully appreciated until the early 21st century, when researchers began mapping mycorrhizal connections using molecular techniques. By identifying the specific fungal species connecting different trees, scientists revealed patterns of connectivity that corresponded with forest health and resilience. Forests with more diverse and complex mycorrhizal networks recovered faster from disturbances like drought or disease, suggesting these underground connections play a crucial role in ecosystem stability. What's particularly fascinating is how this biological internet developed sophisticated solutions to problems that human engineers would only tackle billions of years later. The network demonstrates remarkable efficiency in resource allocation, redundancy that protects against failure, and even security mechanisms that prevent exploitation by cheating organisms that might try to take resources without contributing. We explore the mechanisms behind tree communication in subsequent sections. It's worth remembering that this incredible natural technology evolved not through conscious design, but through millions of years of coevolution, a testament to the power of mutually beneficial relationships in shaping our natural world. In the seemingly silent world of forests, an intricate language exists, not of words and sounds, but of complex biochemical compounds that carry specific messages between trees. This chemical vocabulary allows forests to coordinate responses to threats, share resources, and potentially recognize relationships in ways that scientists are only beginning to decode. Understanding this chemical language requires us to rethink our very definition of communication. When a tree is attacked by insects, it doesn't passively endure the assault. Instead, it mounts a sophisticated defensive response by producing compounds called terpenes and phenolics that can be toxic or repellent to herbivores. What's remarkable is that nearby trees, not yet under attack, will begin producing these same defensive compounds shortly afterward. This phenomenon was first documented in the 1980s by scientists studying African acacia trees, who observed that giraffes would feed on a tree for a short period before moving a substantial distance away, often skipping adjacent trees completely. Further investigation revealed that damaged trees were releasing volatile organic compounds into the air, essentially airborne warning signals. Downwind trees detected these signals and preemptively activated their own defensive systems, making their leaves less palatable by increasing tannin production. This atmospheric communication represents one pathway for tree conversations, but the mycorrhizal network provides an even more targeted channel. In 2013, Dr. Suzanne Simard and her team at the University of British Columbia demonstrated that Douglas fir trees under attack by budworms can transmit stress signals through mycorrhizal networks to neighboring pines. These signals trigger increased production of defensive enzymes in the recipient trees, essentially preparing them for an attack that hasn't yet reached them. This communication isn't limited to warnings about insects. Similar signals have been documented for fungal pathogens and drought conditions. The chemical vocabulary trees employ is remarkably sophisticated. Different threats elicit distinct chemical responses, suggesting trees can describe the specific danger they face. Analysis of these compounds reveals that some trees can produce over 200 different volatile chemicals in response to various stressors. Even more fascinating is evidence that trees might be able to eavesdrop on these chemical conversations between other trees, gathering information about threats in their broader environment. Beyond defense signals, trees exchange recognition chemicals that may help identify genetic relatives. Research from the University of Alberta shows that trees allocate resources differently, depending on whether neighboring trees are their offspring or unrelated individuals. Mother trees appear to preferentially support their seedlings through increased carbon transfer via shared mycorrhizal networks, particularly when those seedlings are growing in challenging conditions with limited light. Seasonal changes trigger another form of chemical conversation in forests. As autumn approaches in temperate regions, declining day length prompts specific hormonal changes in trees. These signals appear to be amplified and synchronized through mycorrhizal networks, helping entire forest sections coordinate their preparations for winter. This synchronization helps maintain the integrity of the forest ecosystem through seasonal transitions. Most intriguing is emerging evidence that some chemical signals may persist in soil as a form of memory. Compounds released during stressful events can remain active in soil for months or even years, potentially providing long-term information to new seedlings about site conditions. This chemical legacy represents a form of transgenerational communication that challenges our understanding of plant memory and adaptation. As we decode more of this chemical language, we're discovering that what once seemed like simple resource exchange between trees is actually a nuanced conversation, complete with warnings, recognition signals, requests for assistance, and perhaps even forms of memory that extend beyond individual lifespans. For trees, chemistry itself is language, and the forest floor serves as both transmission medium and historical record. Beneath the forest floor operates an economic system of remarkable sophistication, a network through which trees trade carbon, nutrients, and water according to need, availability, and even what appears to be social relationships. This resource-sharing network fundamentally changes our understanding of forests from collections of competing individuals to interdependent communities with complex support systems. Carbon transfer represents the primary currency in this underground economy. Through photosynthesis, trees convert sunlight into sugar, allocating a portion to their fungal partners. These fungi then distribute this carbon to other trees in the network, particularly those in need. Using carbon isotope tracing, researchers at the University of Basel in Switzerland have documented carbon molecules moving from sun-exposed trees to those growing in deep shade, often traveling distances of up to 20 meters. This transfer isn't random generosity, but appears precisely targeted. A landmark 2015 study published in Science showed that older established Douglas fir trees send more carbon to younger seedlings that share their mycorrhizal networks than to unrelated seedlings. When researchers shaded these seedlings, carbon transfer from the older trees increased by up to 10%, suggesting an active response to the seedlings' reduced photosynthetic capacity. Even more remarkably, this support increased when the seedlings were more closely related genetically to the donor tree. Water sharing follows similar patterns of need-based distribution. During drought conditions, hydraulic redistribution occurs as trees with access to deep water sources pull moisture upward and release it into shared mycorrhizal networks. From there, fungi transport this precious resource to trees experiencing water stress. A 2019 study from the University of Washington documented water movement through mycorrhizal networks at rates up to 380 milliliters per day, enough to significantly improve the survival chances of drought-stressed individuals. Nitrogen and phosphorus, essential nutrients often limited in forest ecosystems, are also actively traded through these networks. Certain tree species, particularly nitrogen-fixing trees like alders, contribute disproportionately to the network's nitrogen supply. Research from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences has shown that these donor species can transfer up to 40% of their fixed nitrogen to neighboring trees through shared mycorrhizal connections. In return, they often receive other nutrients or defensive compounds from their neighbors. The trading relationships within the network demonstrate sophisticated balance mechanisms. Trees that contribute more resources to the network, typically, receive more assistance when needed, while those that primarily take without giving may find themselves gradually excluded from beneficial exchanges. This suggests a form of forest-wide accounting system that prevents exploitation of communal resources. Dying trees participate in a final act of resource sharing that researchers have termed the mother tree effect. As a tree declines, it often increases carbon flow to surrounding trees, particularly its offspring. This phenomenon represents a form of legacy effect, where the accumulated resources of a lifetime are redistributed to the next generation. Forest ecologists at Oregon State University have documented up to 60% of a dying tree's carbon reserves being transferred to neighboring trees through mycorrhizal networks in the months preceding death. Seasonal dynamics add another layer of complexity to this underground economy. During autumn in deciduous forests, trees withdraw nutrients from their leaves before shedding them. Some of these reclaimed resources are shared through mycorrhizal networks with evergreen species, which remain photosynthetically active during winter months. This cyclical pattern of resource sharing helps maintain the health of mixed forests through seasonal transitions. What makes this system particularly remarkable is its resilience. Unlike human economies vulnerable to disruption, the forest's underground economy contains redundant pathways that activate when primary connections are damaged. This adaptive flexibility ensures that resources continue flowing even when parts of the network are disrupted by disturbances like fire or logging. The mycorrhizal networks connecting forest trees serve not just as resource exchange systems, but as sophisticated defense infrastructures that allow trees to collectively respond to threats. This underground security system enables forests to display forms of immune response previously thought impossible for plants, creating a type of collective immunity that enhances survival at both individual and ecosystem levels. Insect infestations represent one of the most common threats forests face. When a tree suffers insect damage, it produces specific chemical compounds as part of its defense response. Through mycorrhizal connections, warning signals travel to neighboring trees, which then begin preemptive production of defensive compounds like phenols, tannins, and terpenoids. A 2018 study at the Chinese Academy of Sciences documented that these early warning signals could travel through mycorrhizal networks at speeds of up to 20 centimeters per hour, reaching trees up to 20 meters from the initially affected individual within days. This advanced warning system provides crucial time for trees to mount effective defenses before insects arrive. Analysis from the University of Wisconsin showed that trees receiving these early warnings through mycorrhizal networks increased their defensive compound production by up to 48% compared to isolated trees, significantly reducing subsequent feeding damage when insects eventually reach them. This coordinated defense response resembles immune system communication in animals, though using entirely different physiological mechanisms. Pathogen resistance shows even more sophisticated coordination. When a forest tree is infected by a fungal pathogen, it can transmit specific molecular signals through mycorrhizal networks that induce heightened production of antifungal compounds in neighboring trees. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology has identified over 30 unique compounds that travel through these networks to signal specific pathogen threats, allowing for targeted defensive responses that maximize effectiveness while minimizing energy expenditure. Perhaps most remarkable is the network's ability to respond to novel threats. Scientists at ETH Zurich discovered that when trees encounter unfamiliar pathogens, the mycorrhizal network appears to facilitate information sharing between resistant and vulnerable species. Trees with natural resistance seem to teach susceptible neighbors how to produce effective defensive compounds by sharing both warning signals and the molecular templates for effective defensive chemicals. This defense network extends beyond immediate threats to include environmental stressors like drought and heat. Trees experiencing water stress release specific hormonal signals through mycorrhizal connections that prompt neighboring trees to close their stomata, reducing water loss through transpiration. This coordinated response can reduce water consumption across an entire forest stand by up to 30% during drought conditions, according to research from the University of New Hampshire. The network appears capable of prioritizing defense information. Studies from the Forest Research Institute in Finland have documented that warning signals about immediate threats, like insect outbreaks, travel more rapidly through mycorrhizal networks than signals about slower developing stresses like mineral deficiencies. This suggests a sophisticated ability to triage information based on urgency, a capability previously associated only with neural systems. Intergenerational defense learning may represent the most sophisticated aspect of this system. When mature trees experience pathogen attacks, they not only warn neighboring adults, but also transmit defense-inducing signals to seedlings connected to the network. These young trees develop enhanced resistance to pathogens they haven't yet encountered directly. This form of transgenerational defense priming resembles immune memory in animals and provides powerful survival advantages to the forest community as a whole. Remarkably, these defense networks don't just benefit trees. The mycorrhizal fungi themselves actively participate in forest protection by producing antibiotics and antifungal compounds that suppress soil pathogens. Some mycorrhizal species even physically protect tree roots by forming dense protective sheaths that prevent penetration by parasitic organisms, creating multiple layers of defensive infrastructure. Together, these mechanisms create a form of collective immunity that far exceeds what any individual tree could achieve alone, demonstrating that cooperation, rather than just competition, shapes evolution in forest ecosystems. The concept of intelligence has traditionally been associated with brains and neurons, but forests demonstrate cognitive capabilities through entirely different mechanisms. By examining how forest networks process information, store experiences, and coordinate responses, we can explore a form of intelligence that challenges our neurocentric understanding of cognition and points to a more inclusive definition based on functional capabilities rather than specific biological structures. Information. Processing in forests occurs through biochemical signaling rather than electrical impulses. When environmental conditions change, trees produce specific hormones and signaling molecules that travel through both air and mycorrhizal networks. These chemical signals can encode complex information about external conditions, internal states, and appropriate responses. Research from the University of Turin has documented that a single stress event can trigger the production of over 50 distinct signaling compounds, creating a chemical vocabulary with remarkable information density. Memory in forest systems takes multiple forms. The most direct is epigenetic, changes in gene expression that don't alter the underlying DNA sequence, but can persist for generations. Trees exposed to drought or insect attacks undergo specific epigenetic modifications that enhance their defensive capabilities. These modifications can persist for decades and in some cases be transmitted to offspring. A 2017 study from the University of Aberdeen found that pine trees retained memories of drought stress for up to 8 years through persistent epigenetic changes that allowed faster stomatal response to subsequent water shortages. Beyond individual memory, forests demonstrate collective memory through soil chemistry. Chemical signals released during stress events can bind to soil particles, creating a persistent record that influences future generations. Seedlings growing in soil where parent trees experienced pathogen attacks show enhanced resistance to those same pathogens, despite never encountering them directly. This soil-based memory system can preserve information about environmental challenges for decades or even centuries. Learning capabilities in forests manifest through adaptive responses that improve with experience. Research from the University of Montreal has documented that trees repeatedly exposed to particular insect species develop increasingly specific and efficient defensive responses over time. The chemical profile of defensive compounds becomes more precisely targeted to the specific herbivore with each exposure, suggesting a form of refined response that parallels learning in neural systems. Decision-making occurs when trees allocate limited resources based on integrated information from multiple sources. A tree simultaneously processing signals about herbivore pressure, drought conditions, and nutrient availability must decide how to distribute its carbon between growth, defense, and maintenance. Studies from the Swiss Federal Institute for Forest, Snow and Landscape Research indicate that these allocation patterns aren't fixed, but dynamically adjusted based on current conditions and past experiences, suggesting a sophisticated form of cost-benefit analysis. The forest's equivalent of sensory perception occurs through thousands of specialized receptor proteins that can detect environmental signals ranging from light wavelengths to chemical compounds at concentrations as low as 1 part per billion. These receptors trigger specific biochemical cascades analogous to neural signal transduction pathways in animals. The density of these receptors often increases after exposure to particular stressors, essentially improving the forest's sensory resolution for previously encountered threats. Perhaps most remarkably, forests demonstrate a form of distributed intelligence where no single tree possesses complete information, but the network as a whole produces coordinated, adaptive responses. This emergent intelligence resembles phenomena observed in other decentralized biological systems, like ant colonies or immune systems, where sophisticated behaviors arise from interactions between simpler components. Professor Stefano Mancuso, founder of the field of plant neurobiology at the University of Florence, argues that recognizing these capabilities requires us to reconsider our definitions of intelligence itself. Rather than insisting intelligence must resemble human cognition, we might define it functionally as the ability to solve problems, remember past events, learn from experience, and adapt behavior accordingly. By these criteria, forests unquestionably demonstrate intelligent properties, albeit through radically different mechanisms than those found in animals. This perspective doesn't anthropomorphize trees, but rather expands our understanding of how information processing and adaptive behavior can emerge in biological systems through diverse evolutionary pathways. The discovery of forest communication networks doesn't just transform our scientific understanding of trees. It carries profound implications for how humans relate to forests, manage natural resources, and even conceptualize intelligence itself. As we unravel the complexities of the Wood Wide Web, we find insights that span disciplines from ecology to philosophy, offering valuable lessons for addressing modern challenges. For forest management and conservation, the recognition of mycorrhizal networks demands a paradigm shift. Traditional forestry has often focused on maximizing timber production by planting monocultures and removing competitive vegetation. Yet research from the University of British Columbia demonstrates that forests managed with network connectivity in mind, preserving hub trees, maintaining diverse species mixtures, and limiting soil disturbance, show up to 60% greater resilience to stressors like drought and disease. In Sweden, continuous cover forestry practices that preserve mycorrhizal networks have reduced disease incidence by 45% compared to traditional clear-cutting approaches. Agricultural applications extend these insights beyond forests. Studies from the Land Institute in Kansas show that incorporating mycorrhizal network principles into farming through practices like no-till agriculture, cover cropping, and reduced fungicide use can increase crop yields by 15 to 30%, while simultaneously reducing fertilizer requirements. These approaches essentially tap into nature's existing infrastructure for nutrient cycling and pest management, working with rather than against ecological processes. Carbon sequestration efforts gain new dimensions when considering forest networks. Research from Oxford University indicates that forests with intact mycorrhizal networks sequester up to 35% more carbon than those with disrupted soil communities. The fungi themselves store substantial carbon in soil, with some estimates suggesting that up to 70% of forest soil carbon is directly associated with mycorrhizal structures. Protecting these networks offers a powerful and often overlooked tool for climate change mitigation. Beyond practical applications, the Wood Wide Web challenges our philosophical frameworks. Western intellectual traditions have often drawn sharp boundaries between individuals, emphasizing competition as the driving force of evolution. Yet forest networks reveal the fundamental importance of interconnection and cooperation in natural systems. This perspective aligns with emerging scientific understanding across disciplines, from recognizing the human microbiome as essential to our health, to viewing economies as complex adaptive systems rather than collections of independent actors. For indigenous communities worldwide, these scientific discoveries often confirm traditional ecological knowledge maintained for centuries. The Menominee foresters of Wisconsin have long practiced management approaches that preserve what they call forest memory, the connectivity between generations of trees that science now attributes to mycorrhizal networks. Similarly, many Aboriginal Australian traditions describe forests as communicative, connected entities requiring respect and protection. This convergence of traditional wisdom and cutting-edge science offers powerful opportunities for collaborative conservation approaches. Perhaps most profoundly, forest communication networks invite us to reconsider our definitions of intelligence and consciousness. If trees can remember past events, learn from experience, recognize kin, and make decisions, albeit through mechanisms utterly different from our own, what does this suggest about the diversity of possible minds in the universe? Rather than measuring other life forms against human cognitive standards, we might adopt more inclusive frameworks that recognize many forms of information processing and awareness. As humanity faces unprecedented ecological challenges in the 21st century, the hidden wisdom of forests offers valuable guidance. These ancient networks demonstrate principles that have sustained complex ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. Redundancy that creates resilience, diversity that enhances adaptation, and cooperation that allows specialized roles within integrated systems. By understanding and respecting these principles, we might find pathways toward more sustainable relationships with the natural world. The Wood Wide Web reminds us that beneath the visible landscape lies an invisible realm of connection, one that doesn't just link trees to one another, but also binds humans to the forests upon which our planet's health depends. In a very real sense, we are part of this network too, and its future is inextricably linked with our own.